Hi everyone, welcome to our mini podcast. I'm Evelyn, this is Nathan. We are super excited today because we have a special guest with us, Kamran, who is an international intern Jindal, who has recently spent some time with us in Indonesia. We will be discussing a few legal differences between India and Indonesia. Let's dive in.
All right. So, how's your internship in Indonesia, Kamran?
I would say it's been quite interesting to see the legal differences between the two nations and how the courts operate. Especially the biggest differences were I noticed were when I went to the court, seeing the difference in the judges' behaviors, and especially the fact that you guys actually have legal experts who come in to tell the judge more about law. So that's really interesting to me.
Okay, since you are talking about the legal expert, I will inform you that in Indonesia, it is permissible for litigating parties to present a legal expert to provide testimony during the evidentiary stage of court proceeding. How about in India? Can parties to a case present a legal expert as a witness during trial?
In India, legal experts can absolutely be involved during trials, but it's a bit different. Here, it's a common practice, and you guys bring legal experts to tell the entire courtroom more about law. While in India, they are presented as expert witnesses, and but they mostly tell little bit more about the jurisprudence. I think what's more common in India is for like doctors or psychiatrists to come as expert witnesses and talk about like for the defense of insanity, and they tell whether the accused is sane or reasonable or insane, and that helps them in their defense.
Oh, okay. So I would like to know in criminal cases in India, it is possible for an individual who has committed a criminal offense to become a crown witness. This means the individual may be granted a reduced sentence in exchange for providing testimony.
They can become a crown witness. It's called turned approver in India. They can definitely confess, but there is no provision for them to get a reduced sentence. Maybe if they confess and the judge feels like it, and especially if they are not the main criminal. If they're the main criminal in the case, then there is no way, even after confessing, that they'll get any leeway. But if they are not the main criminal in the case and they confess, then maybe they get a reduced sentence, but it's not a law.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so in Indonesia, there is a court class action or gugatan bersama. Lawsuit may be filed collectively by a member of the public, but they are limited to environmental cases. How about in India? I think there's quite same. It's called public interest litigation.
So our public interest litigations are the biggest part of our legal system. They are the most important part, which is because it allows any public spirited citizen to approach the court when fundamental rights are violated. Even if they are not personally affected, they can reach out for others, because there are a lot of communities who don't know enough about law to fight for themselves. So anyone can do it for them, which is why any lawyer actually who wants to grow tries a lot of public interest litigations and represents communities. We have PILs in wide variety of areas like prisoners' rights, bonded labor, custodial deaths, sexual harassment, LGBTQ plus. So we have quite a bit of PIL cases. Even the most popular case in India is a PIL case, which is Vishaka versus the state of Rajasthan, where the Supreme Court had made guidelines for preventing sexual harassment at workplaces after brutal gang rape of a social worker called Bhavri Devi. So this case really shows us how important PILs are in India, because the guidelines, the CEDAW guidelines, which they made for the sexual harassment of women at workplaces, from this case were what ruled these cases for the next few years till the government made a guideline. So this PILs end up showing that judges can actually make law in India.
Okay, so another thing I found interesting is how Indonesia handles crimes committed by minors. In Indonesia, if a child is between 12 and 18 years old, they are not sent straight to prison. Instead, the system promotes diversity, which is a form of restorative justice that aims for peace between the child and the victim outside of the court. So, how about India?
In India, the Juvenile Justice Act governs juvenile crime. Children below 18 are tried under this law, but there is a provision that if you are between 16 to 18 and you commit a heinous crime, if it's a grave crime, then they can be tried as an adult. So even if you are a minor and you're between 16 to 18 and your involvement in a crime is very severe, then you could possibly be tried as an adult. But the emphasis is still on reform. Courts can step in to check if the child is mature enough to commit the crime and face the punishment. But it's still the main emphasis is on reform, and a major case would be a Pune techie murder case where a 17-year-old kid ran over a tech employee with his car willingly, and in that he faced the same punishment which any adult would face. So although there are juvenile laws, there is still emphasis on checking if the kid is mature enough to do it.
All right. So for the third topics, in Indonesia, there is one controversial issue in Indonesia, which is the use of narcotics for medical purpose. There are a well-known case where a woman planted a cannabis at home to treat her husband's illness. Even though it was a medical reason, she was arrested and jailed. That sparked a debate here, whether narcotic like marijuana should be allowed for medical use. How about in India?
If we're talking about narcotics, I would say that India's primary legislation about narcotics is the Narcotic Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act. So the NDPS Act, before this, multiple colonial era and state specific laws dealt with narcotic regulation. But since this act came into place, it has brought a unified and very strict regime. So in India, this act criminalizes the production, possession, sale, transport, and consumption of any drugs. It has very harsh penalties, and even with small amounts, you can go to jail, and um, you don't get much leeway. Medical cannabis, if we're talking about the case that you mentioned, medical cannabis in India still remains a gray area. There is a lot of debate on whether medical cannabis should be legalized or not. But then there are cases of drug overdose which make the government go further away from it. Like a very recent case, a Bollywood actor called Sushant Singh Rajput overdosed from cannabis, and it went very viral, and that showed that even little amounts of drugs could actually end up killing the person, because of which I think they stray further away from legalizing it.
Okay, so we're gonna take a short break before we move to another section. Thank you for having us, Kamran.
Okay, so hello, Kamran. Nice to meet you and know you.
Nice to be here.
So, moving on from the narcotic, and now I'm Angel and my friend Havel want to talk about more interesting topics. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, moving from narcotic, there's like something debated in Indonesia. Like, is it okay to use the death sentence or death penalty in Indonesia? There's still some debate about it. So, is there any debate that in India do like Indonesia?
So I would say that death sentence, I think, is debated about everywhere in the world. In in India, death penalty is only applied by the Supreme Court in what we call the rarest of the rare cases. So basically, we have a huge standard that we have formed through a case. And the biggest thing about Indian law is that it works through cases, right? So the court itself established a boundary for them in a case called Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab. So in that case, we so that person, the convicted, was already serving a life imprisonment. And after that, when they got convicted in another case, there was a huge debate whether there should be death penalty for them, even when their crime in the second case wasn't that grave. So in that case, our court discussed the if the death penalty is fair itself and how we should apply it. So although they upheld that we should still have death penalty and it's constitutional, but they ended up saying that we should only have it in the gravest of the grave cases, like the most extreme cases, because um, if we have it in every single murder case, it just wouldn't be fair to the people and we wouldn't give them a chance to redeem themselves.
So, like in Indonesia, the government argues that the death penalty is necessary to deter serious crimes, especially the drug-related offenses. Like in Southeast Asia, the drug trafficking and narcotics law is really strict, right? Which are considered as a national threats. Like on the other hand, human rights activists and international organization have criticized Indonesia for not following the global trends toward abolition. Like I want to know what types of crimes that usually can be punished by a capital punishment or death penalty in India. Like what type of cases?
So I think that's something very different where Indonesia cares a lot about drug-related offenses. India strictly saves death penalties for crimes which are heinous to the human life. So like murder, terrorism, rape. But even then, it has to be grave. It has to affect the society as a whole. So basically, I think the most recent example of death penalty in India was a case from 2012, and they were hanged in. By the way, India does death penalty by hanging rather than a firing squad. But so the latest case was the Nirbhaya case. In that case, a woman was brutally gang raped in a bus in Delhi. Um, so and by four guys. So in that case, there were huge riots, protests broke out. There were candlelight marches all over India, and everyone started to lose faith in law itself and the police system because they realized that if they cannot protect a woman in the biggest city in Delhi, uh, and even in the day. The big Delhi, which is the biggest city in India, and the police cannot protect a woman there. How can the legal system work? So that's why they ended up um, taking that into account and gave that penalty to the convicted people because it was about justice, deterrence, and restoring public faith in the Indian law rather than just a murder case.
So, like in Indonesia, the people usually debated about the corruption crime. Should it be punished by a capital punishment? Like in India, how about the corruption cases? Like is
No, in India, we have a separate company act. We have our Indian Penal Code, which governs the Indians when it comes to corruption or laws regarding finance or businesses. But it doesn't include any portion of death penalty, and that's because they consider death penalty as something which kind sort of violates the right to life.
yeah.
So they only give it to people who they are fully convinced with that they don't deserve to live anymore and they won't be able to redeem themselves. Even if it's the biggest of the biggest fraud case, they know that maybe after coming back from jail, after serving their sentence, they will have a change of mind, a change of heart, and they would be able to do something better. So that's why they, even if the life imprisonment is still common. They do that, but they don't do that penalty that much. No.
Oh, okay. So in Indonesia, there's like customary law, or we call hukum adat, that still allow to do the death sentence. In India, how is it? Is it there still hukum adat like our, or you don't have, or you don't use it?
No, in India, basically we have a secular legal system, and although we still have religion-based personal laws, marriage laws, but we don't have a religion-based civil or criminal code, and the secular legal system doesn't include the punishments from Islamic law, I would say,
Oh,
or even Hindu law.
so you still use the Islamic law, or
We only use the Islamic and Hindu and the religious laws for things like marriage, divorce, inheritance. So only family related matters.
So like it's very interesting. Like India have like three big or three major religion, right? Islam, Hindu, and some Christian is
Yeah.
there in India. Like Indonesia is also one of the largest, have the most largest Muslim population in the world, but Indonesia is not Islamic state, right? Like in Indonesia, we have a court that only applies to Muslim, and the point or the context is especially in family law, such as marriage, divorce, inheritance, and endowments. There is like a special court, like for only for religious problem and religious context, and is only applied to a Muslim community. Like in India, is there any like special court for Muslim, like for
So
Hindu?
we don't have a special court designated for any religion. We do have separate overall family codes which govern all of the religions, but we don't have a separate code for one religion. But we do have separate books and separate acts for every religion. So we have the Hindu Marriage Act, we have the Muslim personal laws. So we have proper laws for every religion, and then we even have a special marriages act. So how India does family law is that you can choose whether you want to be governed by your religious laws or you want to be governed by the state provided civil law. So yeah, so and that's decided by how you marry. So if you marry and your marriage is solemnized by the normal religious methods, then you have to follow the method of your religion. So if two Muslims marry, they in by nikah, you have to follow the Muslim law. If two Hindus marry by the normal Hindu rituals, you have to follow the Hindu law. But if you marry through the court and follow the Special Marriage Act, or if it's an inter-religion marriage, so a Hindu and a Muslim marry, or a Hindu or a Christian marry, then they follow the Special Marriages Act and they are governed under the civil law.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, that's quite interesting because even though it's called religious court,
Yeah.
it's still only used for the Islamic.
Yeah.
Like, if others religious want to make maybe like want to divorce or something like that, we just not go into
Yeah,
the religious.
like
The
the
normal court is used to.
yeah, like
we use the normal court.
yeah, the non-Muslim community go to the district court about do like inheritance cases and like marriage, divorce.
Divorce is a very looked down upon thing in Indonesia.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like if someone comes to get divorced to you as a lawyer, you don't
Yeah.
take it straight up. You try to convince them to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like in Indonesia, the divorce is really look like the people usually look upon like it's a really bad thing to do a divorce in Indonesia. Even the lawyer and the law community didn't like only some lawyer that specialize in divorce thing and like family law.
And you cannot even stay in the court for the divorce hearings.
Oh yeah, it's like a closed hearing. It's like a closed hearing. Only the parties that really like only the parties that in the can come to the hearing.
So very very interesting and very different from our.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Next, we will talk about like in Indonesia we have after we're talking about the religious court, we need to talk about in Indonesia we have a constitutional court. Like, is there any constitutional court in India? Like,
So our Supreme Courts and the High Courts themselves have the power. So I think India has just applied the
constitutional law.
yeah in the Supreme Court and High Court itself. So they don't think that they need to make a separate law just so that it's easier for the people. In India, any person can go to the Supreme Court under Article 32 or High Court under Article 226 and just challenge any laws from the Constitution that violate the rights.
Okay, like in Indonesia, we have what we call Mahkamah Konstitusi, or we call it as Constitutional Court, that established in 2003. Uh, the Constitutional Court have like five main duties that they need to do. Like the first one is to review laws against the Constitution, or we usually call judicial review, and the second one is to decide disputes about the authority of state institution, and the third one is to resolve election about the results disputes and to decide on the dissolution of political parties, and the last one is to rule on impeachment. Like in India, like how is the judicial review process that happen usually there? Like what is
So
like how is it?
India follows the basic structure doctrine for judicial reviews, right? So the basic structure doctrine again, it came from a case called Kesavananda Bharati. So very basic case in India. It was about a religious mutt basically combination of two breeds, right? So a religious mutt is people who follow laws of two separate religions. So in India, the Kerala, a state in India, Kerala, their government made new land reform laws.
Okay.
And they wanted to take the land of this religion.
Okay.
So they put a case in the High Court, and then it ended up going to the Supreme Court. And that case from a basic land law case escalated to whether and how much power the parliament even has to amend the constitution, because they made these land reform laws and they were quite different from what the constitution provided.
Okay.
So that's why we ended up challenging whether they can even do this. And it was a very complicated case. The judgment had 13 judges, and the judgment was a 7-6 judgment. So even one person could have changed the entire judgment in the history of Indian law. But they ended up deciding that there will be a basic structure doctrine where things like the rule of law, fundamental rights, independence of the judiciary, the most important things that make the constitution, the basic morals behind it, will always stay intact. No one can change them, but they can change any other part of the constitution. So they just have to preserve the fundamentals.
So like it's interesting that I have one question. Like, can the Supreme Court in India cancel the law that passed by the parliament like itself?
Yes, definitely. And a lot of times they do. And even like historical laws, they end up evolving over time, right? So maybe cases come in where in 1947, when the laws were made, it was okay. But now in 2025, the situation is different.
Yeah,
And in those cases, the Supreme Court does end up making new laws by themselves. Until the Parliament actually makes laws, we end up following what the Supreme Court said. So because India has the whole jurisprudence thing and the common law system where we follow the cases and the precedent a lot more.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think the Supreme Court can not only cancel the laws by the government if they think it's against the constitution, they can make new laws.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting.
Very interesting. Like, so all the case go to the Supreme Court. Now there's no other.
No, we have the district court and the high court, and but if it's a major case about the constitution, we prefer to send it to the Supreme Court. But the high court does also have the power to take it up. But if it concerns the entire nation, it's better to send it to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
Okay, so maybe that's all our topic we're gonna talk about today. And that was very interesting that there's very difference about Indonesia law and the Indian law. very, very interesting and very, very happy we can talk about it with you. Very happy. And so, any other question or something you want to talk?
No, I think we've come across a lot of differences. Then not only like uh, unique things, but like the most important laws that govern a nation, and even that's different. So we can see how the history of a nation actually changes a lot of laws between the nations.
Okay.
And so we want to thank you
Yeah,
Omar
no,
for
thank
the
you for
time.
having
Yeah,
me.
thank you for coming to Indonesia and have the internship in here and talk about
yeah, and give
and
us some insight that we don't know.
no, yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Okay, so
So
thank you, Kamran.
Thank you, Kamran, for coming.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.